guest today, Martin Rauchbauer, is an Austrian-born senior diplomat and recognized expert in diplomacy, the arts, and tech governance. For over a decade, he has shaped the field of tech diplomacy, serving as Austria's first tech ambassador in Silicon Valley from 2020 to 2021, and co-founding Open Austria, the official Austrian representation in San Francisco. Currently, he is executive director of the Djerassi Resident Artists Program in California and co-founder of the Tech Diplomacy Network. Martin, it's so great to have you here today. Thank you for joining me on the podcast.
It's such a pleasure, Sophie.
So I love talking to you. We'll just dive right in and we'll see where the conversation takes us. But you've lived at the intersection of diplomacy, technology, and culture. First of all, that's so cool. Second, who else in the world gets to do it? That's so rare and interesting. And then third, how on earth did you discover this niche and find it? So what early experiences and influences led you to such a unique career path?
Well, thank you. This is a very flattering way of looking at an otherwise complicated career in my life, where I indeed tried to combine these three fields. Let me start maybe with diplomacy. So I did indeed grow up in Austria, in Vienna, which is an interesting geopolitical place. During the Cold War, it was right between the West, it's not member of NATO, and the East, kind of in the middle, a bridge builder between, at the time, the two blocks, as well as a seat of the United Nations and many other international organizations, and of course also historically the place where the Vienna Congress took place in the early 19th century. So a long history of diplomacy. And of course, that is a bit ingrained in the culture where I grew up. And then, of course, it's also a place of culture, of the arts. And then with technology, it's maybe a little different. Vienna used to be a place in the early 20th century of innovation, a lot innovation of ideas, innovations. There was a school of medicine, a school of philosophy, psychoanalysis was born there. So there was a time where a lot of factors played very well to create a unique culture in the sciences, in technology, in innovation, and also in business. I would say today, Austria is a place that is also still at the intersection of many different important regions, people, ideas, and growing up there certainly shaped and interested me. However, I also want to say on a personal level, the reason why I chose diplomacy is not so much because of, some of the aspects of diplomacy have a lot associated with the decorum and the protocol, and that was something that interested me less. But what I do think about diplomats is that they have to have a very big picture view, a bird's eye view on the world and on world affairs. And I thought that was always somehow very interesting to, because it could lead you into very different directions. When you are a diplomat in a country, you really need to, or can, or have the luxury to dive deep into that country's culture, into that country's obsessions. You meet very interesting people of all sorts of and walks of life. And for me, really my fascination with technology started when I was posted to San Francisco and the Bay Area, where I was confronted with this unique mix of great ideas, great people, a beautiful, landscape. And I thought this was a place where I would like to stay for a long time.
Wow. Wait, so you founded Open Austria, and I believe that was in 2016, right? So how did that come about? What problem were you trying to solve, and how did that lead you to California?
So In 2016, which now seems like ages ago,
Ancient history.
it was the time where a lot of countries were seeking inspiration from Silicon Valley. And that was also true of the Austrian government. There were early attempts to establish an Austrian presence in Silicon Valley. And in 2016, really concerted efforts of several Austrian institutions to establish an innovation outpost. So the problem Austria wanted to solve is how do we, tap into the potential of our creative and innovative diaspora already there in Silicon Valley and provide a bridge between Austria and Silicon Valley, between our growing innovation ecosystem and the most important innovation ecosystem still until today of the world. Why do I say it seems ages ago? Because the atmosphere changed markedly between 2016 and between now
Oh,
in
that
terms
feels like
of
such ancient history. So many things have happened since then, and the world's a very, very different place right now.
exactly. The world is a different place. Even Silicon Valley is a different place, I would say.
Yeah.
And people's attitude towards this region have changed. I wouldn't say,
Mm.
um, you know, totally changed, but I think the perception of Silicon Valley has many more layers now than it had in 2016. And I think with these different perceptions, with these different uh, interests also from, a country like Austria, also our role shifted. I would say became more political with the time. And that was an interesting challenge and was one of the factors leading into the establishment of tech diplomacy as a field for many countries, first European countries mainly, but now I would say it's a global practice that has gathered a lot of interest among countries.
So what is tech diplomacy? Because when I studied international relations 20 years ago in college, that was not part of the curriculum. So it's new. What is it comprised of? Is it about attracting the best technology startups or ensuring uh, regulatory access to different markets or allowing your home country's founders to expand into the US market? What sort of priorities might tech diplomats have to consider when they're representing different countries' interests?
All of the things that you mentioned might be part of a country's tech diplomacy strategy. Um, I think the reason why the term came up was that a realization that some frontier technologies and the platforms that were, in some ways, most innovative, most successful, most dominant in these technologies, such as social media platforms or AI companies, were starting to dominate not only their markets or new markets, but the influence of frontier technologies like artificial intelligence became relevant for international relations itself and changed, I would say, the dynamics. One
Mm.
of the interesting aspects of traditional diplomacy is that it is really about country to country
Mhm.
diplomacy. So diplomacy really came about as, even though there were historic precursors, but it came really about, with the establishment of the system, the international system of nation states. And it was a tool between nation states, how to govern their relations, their interests. And the interesting thing about tech diplomacy is this idea that big tech companies or tech companies in general have not a say, but maybe they have an outsized influence in international relations, geopolitical impact. And that led some countries, the Danes, started that idea of using
Oh, the Danish
diplomacy.
Innovation Hub has been in Palo Alto. It started in Palo Alto ages ago, I
It
think.
started ages ago, but in 2017, the Danish government appointed the first tech ambassador to Silicon Valley. And
Oh,
that really was an interesting move because usually you appoint an ambassador to the capital of another country. And
oh,
Silicon Valley is not the capital of another country. It's an economic
oh,
powerhouse.
there's no rule that ambassadors only go to capitals and
There is
diplomats go to all the
actually,
other
yeah, there
posts.
is. There are rules about
Oh, there
diplomacy
are.
in
Okay.
international law, and the Austrian ambassador, the Danish ambassador to the United States, they are in the capital.
Oh,
That's the
okay.
rule,
Okay.
and
Okay.
in international law, that's a meaningful position, and
Okay.
the title tech ambassador is not a title recognized by
No, recognized
international
by
law.
international law, but
Yeah.
it's at a level of prestige based on common parlance that shows the esteem and importance given to this role.
That's absolutely correct. It's really very highly symbolic that countries would use titles like ambassador. Other countries use the title envoy. Um, but these are all symbolic titles that come from the world of diplomacy and international law, and to use it rather than for centers of political power to centers of economic power shows many things. It shows a growing importance of private sector companies in
Mm-hmm.
international relations, but it also shows a willingness or even a necessity of countries and governments to respond
Mm-hmm.
by, in some ways, ramping up their own diplomatic capacities and use diplomacy as a tool to serve countries and their citizens' interests.
So the tech ambassadors, the tech diplomats, they are not simply here to uh, attract startups to their countries or help their startup founders here, but they're also here with the purpose of, if a country needs to talk to a FANG company, having a person who has a business card that says, "Hey, I'm the ambassador. Give me a meeting with the CEO. We got to talk about this country's interests and maybe the new laws coming in or the regulations or how this technology is impacting our citizens and what we want to do about it."
I think that you're absolutely right. If you basically use prestige, um, uh, i- both and the prestige comes with the title you bestow upon yourself about your
Right.
own representative, but also in some ways about the relationship, right? If you elevate the relationship, there was this idea that it would be more prestigious and more interesting also for private sector representatives to engage with governments. It came from a really need to engage on more levels than before. And, if you think of a big tech company like Google, like Meta, like Amazon, these, big platforms operate on different levels, have different agendas, and regulation is one of them. Investment is another. Countries have different interests. And so do their citizens. And so there are different ways you need to engage. And I would say tech diplomacy is the umbrella term whereby countries engage with
Hmm.
big frontier technology leaders.
And we've seen this come up so many times in so many different ways over the last 10 years. So, elections and social media, and then um, COVID and all of the technologies that sprung up in that time, and supply chain issues, and now AI, which is being treated completely differently in the United States and the European Union. So, what are some ways that governments and tech companies, whether they're startups or late stage corporations, how Are they talking past each other, and how can they collaborate better?
I think that they are talking with each other, and they have been talking with each other for a while. These conversations that are necessary are complex. They're not easy. They're not obvious. As much as we would like to think
Mhm.
that solutions, how to regulate, how to shape the space, the markets, the ultimately our digital infrastructure, those are complicated conversations, and
Yeah.
regulations in and of itself is neither something good or something bad. It needs to be the right kind of regulation. Otherwise, countries can end up harming themselves if they put the wrong regulations. They can often have unintended consequences. You target a problem and then you create new problems. So I would say these conversations are necessary. They take place in different, forms. They're also tech companies have their own representations, their own relationship managers, government relations, or traditionally what has been referred to as lobbyists. They try to shape these legislative processes in centers of political power, in parliamentary processes. And I think what tech diplomacy is trying to really do is establish channels of communications at a high level, at an executive level. If problems are very big, if problems are, come up all of a sudden, that you have the right channels of communications to talk about them. Sometimes, it takes even a tech company a while to realize what their products, what their services um, mean in different countries. There are different cultural contexts, for example, for social media companies, where the assumptions, the values that you started out with shift and change. And of course, also the laws and regulations you need to comply with change. And therefore, it's also in the interest of private sector companies to establish capacity to understand this increasingly complex and
Mm.
increasingly fragmented world for your customers, for your governments, for also your supply chains, which has become a huge problem. When you have a world that is increasingly fragmented and sometimes competitive, and marked by rivalries between different powers and different blocks. And there's been a lot of talks about tariffs. This hugely
Right.
affects companies that try to think globally and have business models and assumptions that work when you think of the world as a global market, and work much less when you look at the reality of a world that is in some ways shifting apart.
Uh, I was just thinking, it used to be that diplomats were government to government, but now that some are government to private sector, it's sort of like, well, if it's the private sector talking to governments, we call them lobbyists. And then if it's the governments talking to the private sector, now some of them are diplomats. So that's really interesting. And there's been so much. So as a leader of tech diplomacy, which is this global network of tech diplomats, I'm just curious, how many tech diplomats are there in the world, and how many have something to do with the United States and their country versus how many are maybe between other countries?
So it's hard to make a head count because it's still a contested concept. So
Okay.
which is one of the reasons why we established the Tech Diplomacy Network, also to engage with academia, with centers of capacity building like diplomatic academies, where we teach tech diplomacy. There are other competing concepts like digital diplomacy, e-diplomacy, science diplomacy, which is a more traditional concept, which clearly overlaps. And so,
Mm.
some countries take a more traditional approach there. I would say um, a bold claim that we have at the Tech Diplomacy Network, that very soon and in the future, all diplomacy will be tech diplomacy. And we might as well drop that word, because frontier technologies really shape all kinds of
Wow.
activities of a foreign ministry, of a foreign service, whether it is cultural diplomacy, whether it is development collaboration, whether it is security and safety policy, whether it is defense, whether it is economic and innovation diplomacy. So we think that tech diplomacy is just a focus, an awareness, how much frontier technologies like artificial intelligence, but also quantum computing, quantum technologies are in reality impacting and shaping the international system. And it's kind of a call for action, both to the private sector and to governments, to take note and to react and to respond to these new realities, ramp up their capacities, and engage in this new practice.
So the world is changing really quickly. There's, I'm sure, well, as you mentioned, tariffs and supply chain issues have been a top thing that tech diplomats have been thinking about. It seems like there have been a lot of negotiations behind the scenes on those, but most of them at the country level, not in Silicon Valley and the private sector level. So there's that's been going on. But then these frontier technologies, the decentralization of finance through crypto and blockchain, the really fast pace of AI technologies moving forward. And even over the last few years, there's been several thought leaders and books and experiments of, seeing countries as platforms, like the way tech companies might be platforms. Where do you think this is all heading? What will the world look like in 100 years? How are we supposed to navigate this time of rapid change?
That's a good question. I think, diplomacy never really is an end to itself. It's a means to navigate whatever world you are living in. And the world that we are confronting is a world of increasing division. I think that the time where we would have hoped after the end of the Cold War, which is a time I remember very well, it was my formative years, the celebration of the end of this kind of ideological confrontation after the Cold War. There was Francis Fukuyama, who's now a professor at Stanford University. He at the time wrote this famous book, The End of History, celebrating, the idea that we have kind of come to an agreement of what kind of world we want to live in. And I think that time is clearly over. I think there's an increasing realization that goes beyond academia or intellectual, esoteric debates. There's increasing realization among people that we do live in a different world, and it is a world of division, whether this is divisions, political and ideological divisions within countries, whether it is a growing, realization that there are countries or groups of countries or blocs that are competing with each other. And so the era of globalization, of a globalized world, is in some ways shifting to a more fragmented world. At the same time, we realize that there are some problems, that require a kind of global mindset. Nevertheless, they've become more pertinent than ever. If you think of climate change, if you think of some of the challenges as well as the opportunities that come with frontier technologies, we need global cooperation rather than global confrontation. Some of these challenges are potentially, threatening our very existence as humanity. And so I think that realization that we are at the same time fragmented and that there is a need to work together, otherwise we will not survive, really calls for any kind of tools that help this collaboration. I think diplomacy is a very strong and important one, which is why I believe that diplomacy, not just for diplomats, but diplomacy on so many levels will really be an important concept for the years to come.
Well, I think that's a great segue into the arts, which is the other area of your expertise. And I would say when everything feels fragmented and changing, it's what are the things that give us hope, that can bring us together, that can sustain us and help us collaborate and find new ways to be human in this changing world. So, uh, how, how, how has your involvement with the arts woven through your involvement with tech diplomacy, and what happens when all these worlds collide? Where do you see this all going for us?
Yeah, and so my involvement with the world of arts goes back to the beginning of my career. Even I studied literature and philosophy, which is an unusual uh, field of study, at least in the field of diplomacy. So there was an interest there from the beginning. I did work in the field of cultural diplomacy quite a bit, leading cultural institutes in Mexico for Austria and also the United States. And that led me to work a lot with artists, artists that, are fascinating individuals, but that are also in the marketplace of new ideas, unusual ideas, are experts in, not only illustrating the world as we are, but dreaming um, a world as it could be. And that's a really beautiful thing. You spoke about, what remains, what to hope for. And I think art is the field where we find hope, because artists have this incredible capacity, almost necessity, almost internal obsession to create imaginative worlds, future possibilities, which I find very attractive on a personal level, but I also find on an institutional level that countries, as well as societies, really need to invest in arts as a necessity, not as a luxury, not as a nice to have. It's sometimes, when there's a financial time of need and this and cutbacks, and where you think of where do you invest? The arts are often the first, you know, this sometimes the first field of where people think we don't really need that. I think they should be, that it should be the field where we absolutely need to invest and keep investing in. And yes, indeed, I have worked with artists throughout my career. The current organization that I lead, the Djerassi Resident Artists Program in California, is at a really special place because it works with artists from all disciplines. So not just visual artists, but also writers and filmmakers and dancers and choreographers and sound artists and musicians and composers. So it is a really nice way of engaging with the arts in a very general sense and get a sense of what artists are concerned with. And doing that in a residency is also interesting because you really get to know the people. You get to know how the people when they work and when they create.
Mhm.
So I like to look at an artist residency almost like as a laboratory where you can watch the process of creation and creativity, as it happens, which is a fascinating thing, and also leads me to believe that the process of creativity, particularly at a time when we have artificial creativity, and creativity in itself become a big question mark. I think human creativity remains a big mystery, a big potential, for us, and therefore needs to be supported and well preserved in order to enable a better future for us all.
Well, if I allow myself to imagine kind of like the best case scenario for humanity with artificial intelligence and um, infinitely cheap production of goods, it's a world of abundance. And maybe there's more mini entrepreneurs, and maybe we collect into cities as the focus of a vibrant cultural life. But I think in a world of unlimited abundance, what do? Well, we create, right? We all have a creative spark. We all have artistic impulses in us. Even, I think of the startup founders that I help as artists, and they just happen to use coding as their palette. And so, um, uh, as I think about what we would need to up level to do as a species to navigate that transition with grace, in which, because we still have to grow if we're gonna, get into that abundance place, which will be wonderful. But we don't all know how to be creative, right? It's so easy to lose touch with that, and in our rushed, hectic pressures of modern lifestyles. So I think it's really wonderful that Djerassi is this laboratory of creation, because if we can continue to have places where the artists can go, then they can teach the rest of us how to connect back and find that part of us that maybe we feel we've lost.
Oh, I totally agree. Yeah, I think that there is, of course, like with all technologies, if we think of AI and generative AI as this, new thing that since a number of years is now captivating our imagination, there's a lot of, positive potential for ultimately the automation, of creative processes. And if we're honest, there are a lot of things that we create that can be automated, even, and always could be or could have been automated. We are not in every moment of our days. We're not always geniuses. There's a lot of tedious work, even in creating and writing an email so I think, or in coding something, or in, just creating something, there are elements that can be automated and maybe made more efficient and free up time. So that's the hope. That's the hopeful part.
Mhm.
There are, of course, people that warn us that, we might, that there is in every human creativity these parts that are kind of automated, that are not so creative, because we either copy other people, the people before us, or because we do
There's some
certain.
quote that's like the best, like good artists copy, great artists steal. I don't know who said that, but there's
Right,
the counter
yeah.
argument to that.
Right. I mean, I think there is for sure an element of. I mean, you don't, whether you're a great thinker or whether you're a great artist, you do not create everything from scratch. You are always the dwarf that stands on the shoulders of a giant. So, it's part of our human condition to learn. Even when we grow up, education is all about that, right? It helps us communicate with generations before. It helps us communicate with other great minds. So it's a shared thing when we create. It's never just an individual thing. Um, the warning voices that I mentioned before do not necessarily look at AI as as this big threat of replacement, which we also have to be concerned of, but more as of what will it do with our minds, long term. And the feeling is that once you stop doing certain things as a habit, you kind of unlearn how to do them. And there is a good friend of mine who has studied the long-term effects of artificial intelligence and generative AI, Jaron Lanier, who in a recent conversation said his big fear is not that AI replaces artists, but that it dumbs us down as humanity. And I think there is something to that. We have to be careful not to unlearn, how to be creative. And I think we will. I think I do believe in the resilience of us to respond when we do see, some new technologies, some new tools, some new platforms that initially inspire us and make us use it in all possible ways, and then it takes us a bit of a while that as a society we realize there's a dark side to it. And just thinking about the big euphoria about social media initially, and these hopes that this would connect us and bring us all closer together. And then there's a realization that yes, it does, but it also doesn't. It actually is an element of it that kind of isolates us and harms us. And I think there will be similar long-term realizations about AI, and we will react to that. And so I'm generally optimistic that we are more resilient than we think. But I do think that these frontier technologies have the potential to change our setup, our mindsets, as a society and as individuals as well. And we have to be careful without being paranoid.
Yeah, they give us the opportunity to ask what it means to be human and how do we want to live. So hopefully we can all be mindful enough to do that, because that can be challenging sometimes. But there's opportunity there. There's gold there. We could potentially become more human as a result of these things.
Absolutely. I mean, if I think of my times when I studied philosophy, there was always this hope, and this ambivalent relationship to work, that work is in some ways something that structures our lives and that gives meaning to our lives. But there is also, the absence of work, the thing that we, our free time, the time that we have for ourselves, that is something where we truly, can be our best selves. And, I think we will, when you said we're heading towards a world of abundance, which I would love to be the case, we will maybe, come into a situation where we will have to live a lot more with ourselves
Right.
than we are currently, where we're sucked into our work situations. And that can be tough for some people. And for others, it can be, beautiful and tapping into our, true selves and true potentials. And we need to just be aware of that. We're heading towards times where we'll be tested. And
Right.
I think the world of art is imagining already these worlds that are there to come.
Wow. Uh, you mentioned philosophy, and I know you've also championed digital humanism. So I wanted to ask, humanism, I've learned about and studied, and the, exaltation of us and our potential and our creativity, and what are we here on this earth to do? And philosophers have spoken about that for ages. How do you think about digital humanism?
I mean, the I think you said it before. The new technologies that we are, talking about, have been talking about today, are ultimately also challenging us in what it means to be a human being. And I think at the beginning of the golden age of Silicon Valley, in the 1950s, up to the tech boom that was in full bloom when I arrived here in 2016. There was a hope that we have it in our hands to transform not only our reality, but to transform ourselves, to go beyond our human capacities. This, to either live much longer, to live forever, to change, ourselves not only through traditional means as education, but maybe even through technological means, to become, to engineer ourselves. And this generally can be described as transhumanism, or there were these, thinkers like Ray Kurzweil who really dreamt about, this new world where we would um, transform ourselves. And I think what digital humanism was really saying, let's not forget, what the centrality of human dignity. I think that's really a central concept of humanism in general, that we, use the concept of human dignity as a North Star, as a navigation instrument where we want, everything that we create to lead to. And of course, some of these new technologies have harmed human dignity or have the potential to harm human dignity if we're not careful enough. Can use tools to emancipate, to liberate, but you can also use these very same tools to survey, to limit, to restrict, or to even alter our human nature. And so I think digital humanism really is just a statement of the centrality of human dignity, as we've been thinking about it, since I would say many years, if not hundreds of years. I think the whole idea of enlightenment in the 18th century, the very foundations of this country, the United States, and many other democracies were based on an idea of humanism. And to preserve those concepts while being open to the positive potential of new technologies is what digital humanism is. I did encounter an interesting critique of the concept of humanism coming from, the environmental side, that we also have to be careful that we do need to, while celebrating human nature, we also
want
need to
humans to be alive. We need a place to grow them. So.
Right, exactly. We shouldn't forget that we are, what this is all about, but we are also part of the problem. And there is a beautiful artwork that I always have in mind, where the central piece of humanism, Leonardo's Vitruvian Man, is projected on the melting ice cap. Is projected on a melting ice cap, just showing that's also a side of us humans. We are also responsible for global warming and many of the environmental effects, mass species extinction. So humanism as a concept is maybe not the only concept we need to keep in mind while looking at some of the challenges our planet is facing, but it's certainly a concept worth considering.
The inherent worth and dignity of every person and the earth and its creatures that we live on. So, yeah.
You put it, all of what I try to say in a very good sentence.
Thank you. So you've talked about the blind spots of innovation, and why do you think that artists are uniquely poised to reveal what those blind spots could be?
I think not necessarily are artists, like professional artists, unique. I think, there's a lot of artistic creativity in even non-artists. But I think that essentially, if you are an artist and you are driven by this need to create, and this need to create is bigger than maybe when you are, immersed in a company or in a business context where you obviously need constraints and goals that have something to do with a business model. You need to find a market. You need to, sell your product, and you need to, in some ways, in order to survive and prosper, you need to have constraints, even in conceptual constraints in how you look at the underlying technologies of your product. I think artists don't need to do that. They don't need to sell, a product. It doesn't need to even make sense. It doesn't even need to be useful what they create. They have, in that sense, no limits, and can, while playfully engaging with new technologies, they can arrive at completely different outcomes, sometimes to their own surprise. And I think that freedom that artists have is something that we institutionally need to preserve as a society, so that we discover, that we keep discovering, that we keep surprising ourselves as to the potential of new technologies. And I always think we underestimate artists by just thinking of them as illustrators of our reality. I think artists have this potential to create new realities. Sometimes the rest of humanity needs a few years, if not decades, to catch up with what artists dream of. But if you think of many of the technologies that we have today, they've been dreamt up decades earlier, in science fiction. So sometimes science fiction dreams up a world that we then aspire to actually implement. And the same is true, I think, for many other technologies, many other achievements that we have in the world of reality. First, they get dreamed up in the world of possibilities, and this is where I see the true potential of artists.
Well, to bring it back full circle to Djerassi, where you're the director, and it's a resident artist program in the hills of California and your Woodside in the San Francisco Bay Area with an amazing view of the Pacific Ocean. And tell us what you do there on the land and why it matters and the significance of this program.
Yeah, I mean, it is really nice that, as you can tell from the conversation, when you engage a lot with ideas that are very abstract, that in my daily work, I'm confronted with the reality of managing also a property of almost 600 acres of land, very beautiful land, and you characterized it so well. It's about an hour south of San Francisco, or about half an hour close to Stanford University in the Santa Cruz Mountains. If you have an idea of Silicon Valley and the Bay Area, you'll be very surprised how remote this place is, how few dwellings there are, how you really encounter true wilderness. We have mountain lions and bobcats and deer there, and 6 different biozones, and that creates a unique environment of nature that is perfect for creative minds and artists to engage with. So it's not just nice and beautiful for them as a background. It's really a place of active interaction between creative people and the environment. And my work there is to keep the place running, to make sure that the artists that are there are comfortable and safe and happy and keep coming back. And we've been so far, very successful. There's a lot of artists that have gone through our program, over 2,500 in the last 40 years from over 50 countries in the world. And they have reported back to us that this time at Djerassi was pivotal in their careers, have led them to amazing artistic projects and artistic careers. And we want to continue doing that.
Well, and there's a few calls to action regarding the Djerassi Resident Artist Program. One is, if there's artists listening to the podcast, you can apply to do one of these residential programs on the land. They're highly selective, but you don't discriminate against what type of art people are doing. So if there's a tech person listening here who wants to create art, by all means, apply. It's an amazing experience. So that's one thing. Another is you offer the Reset program that gives just normal people like you and me the opportunity to engage with the land and the programs there. And are you still thinking of having the retreats for busy professionals to reset for a weekend or a week?
Absolutely. I think we, want to offer this opportunity for, people, startups, companies that just don't want to have a nice place, but want to have a magical place, because
Absolutely.
magic is something that's incredibly useful for people that want to develop their company, that want to develop their business models, that want to grow together and work on their team's spirit. We've seen it. The magic of Djerassi is not just helpful for great art, it's also helpful for people that come together at our place. And that's why we created this program, Reset. And so far, I've had a lot of happy people spending some time at our program.
And I should disclose that I'm on the board, so I'm a supporter of the program and I want to promote it. So if you're listening to this and wondering why I like it so much, well, I just really like it and you should go there to experience it for yourself and the magic that it has. And then another call to action would be in terms of fundraising and donations and partners who care about and the ensuring that this mission and legacy is carried on towards the future.
Yes, I think that we have been really, really lucky in that our local and international group of friends and supporters, once you come to our land, and I invite all of you to do that, we have ample opportunities to visit the Djerassi program. You can't really resist of returning, and some of these, affections have turned into long-lasting supports of and engagements. You are one example of that, Sophie, and I want to thank you here for that.
Thank you.
So if you do, if this has made you curious, and you live in the Bay Area, or you want to visit us in the Bay Area, please take part of one of our hikes. We have a public hike program almost every weekend. You can visit the land. We have occasionally we open up the program, like this upcoming summer in July. There's an open studio event, and in September we will open up again the program in for a big afternoon with artists and celebrations at the program, the annual Artful Harvest on September 28th.
Mhm.
You will find information about that on our website, djerassi.org, and we
We're going to
really
link to
look
that in the
forward
show notes. Yeah.
for you to come and visit us. And it might be the beginning of a long friendship. People tend to return to Djerassi, so beware before you engage with us that it might become a long-term thing. But it is, I hear that people generally don't regret paying a visit to our program.
It's a wonderful experience. And we'll put a link in the show notes to djerassi.org where you can go to the events page and you can see the Summer Arts Hikes 2025, the Artful Harvest Dinner. I'll be there on September 28th. There's sound immersion experiences. So there's all sorts of wonderful ways to engage with the program and the land. Okay, so we're coming to a close, Martin, and I'm just curious if you have any closing words of advice or wisdom that I think of you and me as people who love the arts and are very creative, but we're sort of like, well, are we artists? Is that, reserved for the actual artist who gets to be creative? So I'm just curious if you have any words of advice or wisdom or anything you look to that could just maybe help people connect with their inner creativity as they navigate our new world.
Yeah, I think that as you said, people are more creative than they think. I think that generally um, the Bay Area is a very conducive place. When you come here, you generally are encouraged to discover your inner creativity. And I would just, if you're listening and have doubts, about your own abilities. That's also sometimes a positive thing, to engage in self-reflection and self-evaluation, but also listen, to your own passions. Having passions, listening to them, engaging in them is something really important that makes us truly human. And creativity is something incredibly beautiful. Listen to your own inner voice and live it. Life is short, and creativity is just what makes it beautiful.
Thank you so much, Martin. It was lovely having you on the podcast today. Thank you for sharing your experiences and insights with us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Sophie.
And everybody, check out the show notes. You can get links to connect with Martin, Djerassi, tech diplomacy, everything we chatted about there. And do subscribe to the newsletter and share this episode with a friend. In the newsletter, you'll get updates on all of my podcasts and interesting discussions with the world's really brilliant people. And also, of course, you can get the latest immigration updates. Thank you so much for listening.